I looked out the window and saw freshly fallen snow. All the houses along the street were decorated for the new year. Santa Clauses and reindeer on the roofs, Christmas scenes in the yards in front of the houses, garlands on the trees outside and inside, glowing in the windows. The spirit of the holiday was everywhere, just not in my house. I turned away from the window and looked around. The Christmas tree lay on the floor, in shards of glass from broken bulbs and broken Christmas decorations. I probably should have seen this coming. Candy always had a fiery temper, and she did not like her Christmas gift. She didn't like it at all. But what do they always say? It's the thought that counts, not the gift. I took one last look at the mess and decided that cleaning could wait until morning, then went asleep. Candy and I had been married for 5 relatively prosperous years. I was her second husband, and she was my third wife. We both worked as middle managers, and 2 salaries, along with having no children, allowed us to lead a fairly decent lifestyle. Candy and I were party lovers, and on weekends you could bet we would be at a party, throwing a party, or heading out to drink and dance. Candy was a beautiful and sexy woman, and she attracted a lot of male attention even when she dressed conservatively in calm settings. At parties, where alcohol flowed freely, loud music played, and there were no inhibitions, she dressed in a way that attracted attention that bordered on being flamboyant. Men constantly hit on her, spending a lot of time trying to pull Candy away from the crowd and take her somewhere they could try their luck in private. Candy good-naturedly brushed them off, but that never stopped them from coming back and trying again. And me? Like most men fortunate enough to have such a desirable woman, I had to learn to live with it. It's not hard to do when you trust your partner completely. I would sit back calmly, knowing that Candy was mine and that no matter how persistent the men were, she would brush them off. Candy had a best friend. Marlon and Candy had known each other since elementary school and were closer than most sisters. I didn't know Marlon very well, but I didn't like her. There was just something about her that didn't sit right with me. When I met Candy and we started dating, Marlon seemed to always be around. And I know it sounds silly, but whenever Marlon was around, I had a bad feeling. Luckily, in my view, Marlon got married about 6 months before Candy and I did, and Marlon's husband found a job in another state and they moved away. Marlon and Frank had a civil ceremony, and of course, Candy had to be there, and I had no choice. I remember looking at Frank and wondering what such a solid guy saw in Marlon. Although I barely knew them, I would have bet 20 to 1 that their union wouldn't last long. Frank and Marlon flew in to be nearby when Candy and I got married, and I couldn't help noticing how worn out Frank looked. I wondered if it was due to his new job or his new wife. Marlon might have lived out of state, but that didn't mean she disappeared from Candy's life. They talked on the phone 2 to 3 times a week, and sometimes their weekend calls lasted more than 2 hours. One Sunday, after one of those 2-hour calls, Candy asked me if I minded if she took a couple of days to visit Marlon. I've got some time to spare, and things aren't going well between her and Frank. She needs a little cheering up. Do you really think it's wise to go there and meddle in their problems? You might just make things worse. She's my oldest and dearest friend, but I'm not blind to her flaws. It can be a bit difficult to live with her, and maybe my presence will ease some of the tension for Frank. I didn't think her leaving was a good idea, but I was smart enough to realize that trying to talk Candy out of it would only harm our marriage. So I simply said, "You know her better than I do, dear, and if you think visiting will help, then go ahead." Candy was gone for 5 days, and when she returned, she seemed troubled. I guess that her visit hadn't gone as she had hoped, but I didn't pry, and after a couple of days, she was back to her usual self. 6 months later, Candy again asked if I would mind if she visited Marlon. I didn't want her to go, but I had no solid reason to refuse, and I knew I couldn't just brush it off. I'd prefer if you didn't. All that would achieve was Candy asking me why, and the answer, because I don't like her, would be unacceptable. Candy was gone for 4 days, and when she returned, she was a bit down, just like after her first visit. But, as before, she was fine again after a couple of days. Over the next year, Candy would take a 3-day weekend every 3 to 4 months to visit Marlon, and she always returned looking like death warmed over, but her bad mood would pass after a couple of days. Then one day, Candy approached me and said, "Baby, can I ask you a huge favor?" "I don't see why not." I never say no to you, do I? You could this time. Why should I? I'm not blind, baby. You've never mentioned it, but I know you don't like Marlon. I thought I hid it pretty well. Maybe from others, but I know you too well. So, I take it this huge favor has something to do with Marlon? She and Frank have split up, and she's moving back here. Can she stay in our spare room until she finds a job in her own place? I didn't want to say no. I wanted to scream, hell no. But that would have only worsened things with Candy. To preserve that piece of peace, I had no choice but to agree. A week later, Marlon moved in with us, but it didn't take a week for things to start changing. At first, it was nothing special. Just Candy and Marlon spending a lot of time together in the kitchen, laughing and talking, which in itself meant nothing, but it always seemed to quiet down or stop when I entered the room. Then Marlon and Candy started having a girls' night, once a week. Then every Saturday and Sunday they went apartment hunting together, which they never seemed to succeed in finding. What took me weeks to notice was that, returning from an evening walk or apartment search, Candy was a bit distant from me, just as she was when she returned from her visits to Marlon. This lasted no more than a day, but it was there, and I noticed it. One day I was at work when my secretary told me that Frank McBride was on line 3. Frank was Marlon's husband, or rather, her ex-husband, so I answered the call. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, he got straight to the point. I've been struggling with this for a while. At first, I told myself it was none of my business and thought maybe you already knew, thinking perhaps you and Candy had one of those open marriages. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to call you. I wouldn't want you to end up with AIDS. What are you trying to tell me, Frank? I'm not going to spell anything out for you. I'm just going to send you a package. You can look at it and make up your own mind. The fact that Marlon is now with you tells me that I've made my decision. I sent the package this morning, so you'll get it the day after tomorrow. Take care and good luck, he said before hanging up. I couldn't for the life of me understand what Frank was trying to tell me. Of course, I wasn't out of my mind. So it was obvious that whatever was in the package concerned Candy as much as it did Marlon, and it was equally clear that Frank didn't think I would like what was in the package. His mention of an open marriage and AIDS gave me a hint as to why he and Marlon split, but I trusted Candy unconditionally. The next 2 days dragged on endlessly. On Thursday morning, a package arrived at my office. I told my secretary that I didn't want to be disturbed, closed my office door, and opened the package. Inside the box, there was a videotape and a thick paper envelope measuring 30 by 35 centimeters. I opened the envelope and found 24 20 by 25 centimeter photographs and a copy of a report from Simpson Investigations. The photographs featured Marlon, Candy, and 3 men, apparently taken in a bar. The lighting was poor, but the photos captured the 2 women and 3 men either dancing or sitting in a booth. In the dancing photos where Candy was depicted, there was a man's hand on her buttocks as she smiled at him, a man's hand on her right breast as she smiled at him, and 2 photos where a man's leg was squeezed between hers and pressed against her crotch. Only in one of the booth photos was Candy clearly visible, where a man was hugging her shoulders and she was smiling back at him. In other photos, Marlene was captured kissing with 3 men groping her, and in several stall shots, a man's hand could be seen reaching under her dress and touching her breasts as she smiled at him. In another photo, her hand could be seen between his legs. The report from Simpson Investigations stated that they picked up the subject, Marlon, and an unidentified companion, Candy, at 1945 from the subject's residence. They followed the subject to Harris Grill Bar, where the subject and her companion met with 3 as yet unidentified men. The report further noted that the 2 women were seen in extremely friendly relations with the 3 men. At one point, the subject was observed fondling one of the men where all 5 were seated. At 22:15, the 2 women and 3 men left Harris, crossed the street, and headed to the Venus Motel, where they entered room 116, where they stayed until 1:30. Afterward, the subject and her companion were dropped back at the subject's residence, arriving at 2:05. It seems my absolute trust in Candy was somewhat misplaced. I took the videotape and went down to the conference room, where we had a TV and a VCR set up. I locked the door behind me and watched the recording. It only showed Marlon and Candy walking out of the bar with 3 men into room 116 at 8:15 and leaving the room at 1:30. Having been married twice before, and both marriages falling apart after catching my wives cheating, I was already familiar with how denial works and how much time you spend hoping that things aren't really that bad and will improve, which only causes pain in the long run. I called my friend Roger, who was also my lawyer, and asked if he could spare a few minutes for me. He said he could help, and I immediately went to his office. He told me what I had already figured out. I had no evidence, at least based on what I had. He went over it point by point. The photos themselves mean nothing. We don't know what happened a moment before the snapshot was taken, or a moment after. The photograph could have been taken just as a man placed his hand on Candy's buttocks, and in the next moment she could have pushed his hand away or slapped the man. The same can be said about the photo where a man's hand is on her breast or around her. We don't know what happened immediately before or after, and the investigator's report does not mention Candy or what she did. Their focus was Marlon, and it was on her that they concentrated. The recording only proves that 2 women entered a motel room with 3 men. They didn't go from the bar to an office or rent a room themselves, which means that one or more of the men were already staying there, so you can't demonstrate intent to commit marital infidelity. Once inside the room, we have no idea what they were doing. They could have been playing cards or watching videos. What we think happened doesn't matter. It's only what you can prove in court that counts, and you don't have evidence. You have very good reasons to believe that your wife is cheating on you. You have 2 options: confront Candy face to face and hope she confesses everything, or hire your own investigator to dig up information on her. That's exactly what I did. I hired a private detective firm and set them on the trail. They quickly established that during the girls' night out, Candy and Marlon would pick up men from bars and take them to motels. Since these were different bars or motels, the investigators found it difficult to obtain reliable audio or video evidence. "Do you have to travel for your work?" the lead investigator asked me. "Often." "Could you go on a long trip, say for 4 to 5 days, or simulate a business trip of that length?" "I could, but why?" "Both women are living in your house. It's the place where they're most comfortable, and I suspect that if you were gone for a few days, they would bring men they pick up to your house instead of to a motel. It would be quite easy to set up audio and video recording in your house." That evening at dinner, I told Candy that I have a business trip scheduled for next week. "I'm leaving Monday and won't be back until the end of Friday, or maybe even Saturday, so you'll have the place to yourself." "What do you mean?" "I mean that from today until Monday morning, you should give me enough love to last the whole week." Candy smiled. "I can do that." And she did. She exhausted me almost every evening until Monday arrived. She even sent Marlon out of the house to be alone with me. On Monday morning, I kissed Candy goodbye, told her she could contact me on my cell if she needed me, and left the house pretending to embark on my trip. I drove across town, checked into a hotel, then went to work. Marlon found a job, so on Monday, after both women had gone to work, the detective agency broke into the house and installed the wiring. On Tuesday morning, the detective called me and said that the 2 women had left the house, picked up 2 men, and headed to a motel. Tuesday night was a repeat of Monday night, except that the 2 women took 3 men they met to the motel. On Friday morning, I received a call saying they were ready to report. The women had picked up 2 men and brought them home. On Thursday evening, there had been 3. The detective told me I could come to his office on Friday afternoon to collect the report and tapes. I told them I would be there in the afternoon. Then I called Candy at work and told her I would be home in the evening. That same day, I went to Myron Investigations to pick up the report and tapes. "Did you review them?" "Yes, we've looked at the results from both recordings." "Did we get what I need for a divorce?" "It's hard to say." "I don't understand. Did you find evidence of my wife cheating?" "Again, it's hard to say. You'll need to watch the recording and make your own decision." "Come on. Either you have her on tape having sex with another man, or you don't." "Well, I can clarify that. On neither of the 2 nights that we have recorded did your wife have sex with another man." "Are you saying she isn't cheating on me?" "Again, that should be your decision. You'll need to watch the recordings and form your own opinion on that." I paid the bill, then picked up the tapes and returned to my office. Everyone had left for the weekend, so I went to the conference room, locked the door behind me, and sat down to watch the recording. The episode, recorded on Wednesday evening, began with Candy, Marlon, and two men entering Marlon's room. Marlon and the two men immediately undressed, while Candy went over to a chair, sat down, and started watching. Marlene knelt in front of one of the men and began to satisfy him. The other man walked over to Candy, waved her over, and said, "Come on, honey, take off your clothes and let's have some fun." "I'm sorry, but I told you before we even left the bar that I wasn't cheating on my husband. You knew before we even got here that it was just going to be you two and Marlene. What's the matter? You enjoy watching?" "It doesn't matter. All you need to know is that you're out of luck with me." The recording lasted 3 hours, and I quickly fast-forwarded through most of it. Throughout this time, Candy sat in a chair watching as Marlon took both men in all 3 of her holes. In the next segment of the recording, Candy was seen entering our bedroom, undressing, and lying down on the bed. 2 minutes later, a naked Marlon entered the room and lay down in bed with Candy. "I saw you, girlfriend. I saw you put your hand under your skirt. When are you going to stop pretending? You want to do this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be stroking yourself watching me. You're missing out on great sex." "How many times do I have to tell you, Mar? Hal has 2 ex-wives who became exes because they cheated on him. I love him and I don't want to be an ex-wife, so I don't cheat." "Well, all I can say is that you're missing out on some damn good fun. Come on, baby, do me." My jaw almost hit the floor when Marlon spread her legs wide, and Candy knelt between them and went down on her best friend. After calming down, Marlon said, "Oh God, baby, that was freaking amazing. You do it better than anyone else." Candy reached out, turned off the light, and the 2 women snuggled together. A few minutes later, I heard the even breathing of people sleeping. I felt like having a drink, so I went down to my boss's office where there was a bar, grabbed myself 2 shots of blackjack and an ice cube, returned to the conference room, and resumed the recording. 2 women and 3 men entered the room, and one of the men said, "Why don't we use the room across? It has a bigger bed." "That's my husband's bed, so we're not using it." "Why the hell not? He's not here, and he'll never know." "No, he wouldn't know," said Candy, "but I wouldn't agree. The bed here is big enough." Marlon was already undressing, and the 3 men began to take their clothes off. Marlon was the first to get undressed. She approached and helped one guy remove his pants, then started to suck his penis while he took off his shirt. When all 3 were undressed, Marlon walked to the edge of the bed, and the 3 men followed her. Marlon sat on the edge of the bed, and the 3 men lined up in front of her, backs to me. I saw Marlon's eyes widen, and an expression of astonishment appeared on her face. "Damn. I don't know if I can handle this. Candy, you have to see this." Candy got up from her chair and approached Marlon, and I saw her eyebrows rise, her face expressing something unfamiliar to me. My view was still blocked by the backs of the 3 men, but it seemed Candy reached out to touch something, then pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. She turned and headed back to her chair, but stopped along the way to take another look at whatever it was. In the background, I saw Candy stand up and leave the room. After Marlon drained the 3 men, they dressed and she saw them out. The scene shifted to Candy entering our bedroom. She quickly undressed, grabbed a hairbrush from the dresser, then climbed onto the bed and used it as a dildo. She got up, took a shower, then undressed, lay in bed and began to read. About 5 minutes later, she put down the book, got up, and walked to the bedroom door. She opened it and headed to another room, but then stopped dead. Maybe for a minute, then turned around, went back to the bed, and grabbed the hairbrush again. She furiously pleasured herself when Marlon entered the room and jumped onto the bed with Candy, just as Candy arched her back. When she calmed down, Marlon said, "What happened, girlfriend? I thought you'd do it tonight. I thought Lex really got to you." "He almost did. You'll never know how close I was to it." "You should have gone for it, baby. You missed a great moment. I've never been so filled and excited at the same time. You might never have a chance like that again." From my perspective, that's a good thing. I won't cheat on Hal. I love this man and I won't allow myself to lose him. That makes no sense, Candy. Hal will never find out. But I'm married and I couldn't look him in the eyes. Well, it's your life. And she lay on her back, spread her legs, and said, "Pleasure me, baby." And Candy did the same as last night, going down on Marlon. I turned off the TV and sat staring at the wall. Now I understood what the detective meant when he said that I would have to decide for myself if she was cheating on me. Was it true? Technically, yes, she was cheating. The handjob was still a sexual act with a man who wasn't her husband, and what she did with Marlon on both nights was sexual interaction with another person, even though it wasn't with a man. Lord, I didn't know whether to be angry or not. Candy clearly indicated both times that no one was going to get into her panties, and she told Marlon that she loved me too much to cheat and risk losing me. But what the hell was wrong with her going to the bar with Marlon, hoping for something, and then going to watch? What bothered me most was the way she licked Marlene when her lovers left. It bothered me. It really bothered me. Candy rushed to greet me as I entered the front door. She hugged me, kissed me, and told me how much she missed me. "I hope you had dinner on the plane, honey, because I didn't make anything for you today. I plan to drag you straight to the bedroom. If you're lucky, I might just wear you out enough that you'll barely be able to get up for breakfast in the morning." "I don't think so, Candy. We need to talk. Is Marlon here?" "No, she's gone." "Good. I'd prefer she wasn't present for this." "What's wrong, Hal? What happened?" I went to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and gestured for Candy to sit opposite me. A few days ago, Frank called me, and although he didn't explain why he and Marlon split up, he said he would send me a package that would explain everything. Candy's face went pale when she heard this. I opened my briefcase, pulled out the photographs, videotape, and the report he had sent me, and slid them across the table to Candy. "Suppose you read this, look at the photographs, and then tell me why I shouldn't treat you the same way as the last 2 cheating women I was married to. While you read, I'm going to unpack and take a shower." I left her sitting at the table, staring at the photographs and the report. 20 minutes later, I came down to the kitchen. Candy was crying, and when I entered the room, she didn't look up at me. After a minute or two of silence, I said, "Well, what can you say in your defense?" "It seems you've already made up your mind, Hal. Does it even matter what I say?" "No, not if it doesn't matter to you." "What does that mean?" "It just means that if you're ready to accept what I think, so be it." "That's not what you think, Hal." "Come on, Candy. How can it not be what I think? 2 girls go to a bar together, meet 3 guys, go off with them to a motel room, and stay there for 3 hours? And am I supposed to believe you were playing Monopoly?" "No, but I didn't do anything with any of those men." "What? You're saying you just sat there and watched Marlon have sex with all 3 of them?" "Yes, Hal, that's all I did." "And I'm supposed to believe that?" "You probably won't believe this, but it's true." "So what? You're a voyeur?" "No, I'm more like a bodyguard." "You'll have to explain that to me." "Marlon is a nymphomaniac. I know doctors say there's no such thing, but they don't know Marlon. Marlon likes multiple partners, and she's had some rough times when she was alone with several guys. I'm there to make sure she's safe. I can't imagine that 2 or 3 guys wouldn't be able to overpower you, tie you up, and then do whatever they want with Marlon, and with you too, for that matter. I have a .380 caliber llama, the one you bought me when there were a series of robberies in our neighborhood." "You carry a gun in your purse?" "Only on the evenings when I go out with Marlon." "How the hell did you take it with you when you flew to see her?" "I didn't need to bring it with me. Marlon had her own gun, a small .32 caliber automatic. I used it when I visited her." "A .32 caliber won't stop anyone. It makes them stop and think when it's pointed at their groin." "Did you do that?"
Twice.
"And you expect me to believe that?" "Whether you believe it or not, Hal, it's true." "Is that why you visited Marlon?" "Mostly." "And that's how you girls spend your evenings when she came back here?" "Yes." "And you're saying you never got involved during these little outings?" "I was touched a few times, but I never had sex with another man." "Never had sex?" No, well, I, I guess there was one time. What was that? I stroked a guy once. Why? I don't really know. He was too big, and I was wondering how much bigger he could get. And that's all? No other sexual activity in the evenings? No, Hal, that was the only time. What are you going to do? I'm trying to make myself believe you. I'll try and see if I can deal with it, but my attempts come at a cost. What? I want you to cut ties with Marlon. I want her out of this house by Sunday, and I don't want you to have anything more to do with her. Come on, Hal. She's been my best friend for over 25 years. I can't just turn my back on her. Take your pick of candy. The point is, if she stays in your life, I'm gone. And if she goes, I'll stay. I'll stay as long as you keep your distance from her. And one more thing, I'm not an idiot. So I'm going to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases as soon as I can get an appointment, and I want you to do the same. We'll only have sex with condoms until we both get a clean bill of health. This means at least 6 months, because that's how long it takes for AIDS to show up. Hal, I swear to you, I haven't had sex with another man since I met you. I've always believed it's better to be safe than sorry, Candy. Your story is so unusual that I'm willing to believe it might be true, but as I said, I'm not an idiot and I'm not going to take risks. Those are my terms, Candy. Either you accept them or you don't. I stood up from the table and left her standing there, staring at my back. On Saturday, Marlon found an apartment, and by Sunday evening she had moved into it. Candy apparently explained my requirement to Marlon, resulting in many tears being shed, and Candy was simply unbearable for a couple of weeks. For months passed, and as far as I could tell, Candy had not met with Marlon for lunch or a cup of coffee even once. They talked a lot on the phone, but that didn't bother me. All I required was that Candy and Marlon never go anywhere together and never be alone together. Candy didn't like the feel of condoms, so our sex life slowed down somewhat, but otherwise, our relationship seemed as strong as it was before I received the package from Frank. Then came a week when my company sent me out of town on business for 3 days. I told Candy about it, then called the detective agency I had used before. It was 2 days before Christmas, and after dinner, I handed Candy a box wrapped in gift paper. What is this? An early Christmas present. She unwrapped the paper and found a cardboard box. Inside were 3 envelopes sized 25 by 35 centimeters and a videotape. The envelopes were labeled A, B, and C. What's this? Start with A, then watch the video. After you finish watching the video, read B, and then open C. I'll be upstairs. I left Candy sitting there and went up to our bedroom. A was a report from the detective during my last fake business trip. B in the envelope was a report from the detective during the business trip I had just taken, and the video, of course, was footage of Candy's escapades. In envelope, C were the divorce papers. I was packing a bag when Candy burst into the room. You bastard! How could you do this to me? I gave you a choice, Candy, me or Marlon, and you chose Marlon. So what? You already knew I was telling you the truth when we had that stupid confrontation in the kitchen. I told you I just sat and watched. For God's sake, Hal, you saw it on the video? Yes, Candy, but that's not all I saw on the tape, is it? I saw you and the guy with the huge tool. I saw how close you came to taking it. I saw how after you left the room you were going crazy with the hairbrush thinking about that huge, and I saw you get out of bed naked and head over to Marlene and her guys. You didn't follow through, but you almost did, and I knew that if you kept running around with Marlene, the day would come when you would stumble. What else did I see, Candy? I saw Marlene having unprotected sex with 5 different men, and then I saw you pounce on her and suck it all out of her. You don't have to have sex to get an STD. It doesn't matter how much this little shit got laid. She could have gotten infected before this video was even made. Every time you licked, you risked catching something and bringing it home to me. That's why we needed condoms and tests to make sure you didn't already catch something and pass it on to me. That was another reason I wanted you to stay away from Marlene, so you wouldn't catch something if you turned out to be clean. I gave you a chance, Candy. All you had to do was stay away from Marlon, but you didn't. I left you alone for 3 nights, Candy, and what did you do? You went to the bar with Marlon, and then to the motel for all 3 nights. You made your choice, Candy, and it wasn't me. And now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish packing my things. Are you really leaving? Are you really going to leave me? Yes. She ran out of the room, and a few minutes later I heard a loud crash and the sound of breaking glass. A door slammed. I heard the garage door opener activate, and then silence fell, and I continued packing my things.